Okay, good morning, everybody. We're back. We're here. I like coming out in the morning and being on the beach like this. This is nice. Not a lot of people around today. So I am going to get started on chapter 13. We had chapter 12 where poor old Timothy got malaria, survived it, but scary, very scary for Philip, who took care of him. And I do want you to imagine, if you can, Philip having to be on this island, on a small island, the Cay, by himself, blind, and having to do everything Timothy has been doing to take care of him, the fishing, everything. I mean, it's just unbelievable. So he's very scared. He wants to take good care of Timothy just as much as Timothy wants to take care of him. And there is, I think, and therein lies the beauty of the story. You have the little white boy from a very different background who is completely dependent on this black man from a very different background. And they're sharing their experiences on this island. They're learning about each other. And they're the best of friends. I mean, they really, truly are the best of friends. And they've been bonding ever since. And if you remember that part, I don't want you to forget, is when Philip is wishing his mom and dad could see him lying down next to Timothy. He wants them to see that because that's more powerful than telling a story. And I'm sure you've done that too as a kid. You sit there and go, oh, I wish my mom or my dad can see this, see what I'm doing right now. Because I can tell them about it, but it's not as powerful as when you see it. All right, well, let's keep going on chapter 13 and see where we get to. One chapter today, it's about 8 pages, a little longer than yesterday's. Chapter 13. It was late May. Well, late May. We just jumped ahead. Remember, it was April 6th again. I keep forgetting. Early April, right? Early April when they were torpedoed. Early April 6th, I think. And now it's late May. So April 6th to May 6th would be a month, and then now we're in late May. So we're now getting close to 2 months. 2 months now. It was in late May, I think it was, right? I want to make sure. I think it was torpedoed, early April. Okay, so now we're in May, late May. It was in late May that I believe Timothy decided we might stay there forever. We had not seen a schooner sail or heard an airplane since setting foot on the island. I know it was late May because each day, you might have been asking that, how do they know? Well, here you're going to find out. I know it was late May because each day he dropped a small pebble into an old can that he'd found on the beach. It was our only way to tell how many days we'd been there. Every so often, I'd count them, beginning with April 9th, because April 6th they were torpedoed, and then the 7th and the 8th they were just floating on the raft, and then the 9th is when they landed on the Cay. We now had 48 pebbles in the can. On this day, Timothy said thoughtfully, Philip, does it ever come into your own self that I might be poorly again some morning? I knew he was thinking about malar and the fever, malaria. I said it had. He said, well, you must then know how to provide your own self with fish. For more than a week, I knew he had been laboring over nails to turn them into fish hooks. He always speared the fish or langosta with a sharp stick, but I could not see, of course, to do that. I knew he was making the hooks for me. More time, more effort that Timothy puts in order to save Philip, to help Philip. He said, with a secret tone in his voice, I have found an outrageous good hole on the reef in a safe place. We went down the hill and started out along the reef shelf. By now my feet were tough and I hardly felt the jagged edges of the coral. But I knew that lurking in the tide pools were the treacherous sea urchins. Stepping on them invited a sharp spine in your foot. And Timothy had already warned me that they're very poisonous. They be giving you terrible pain. Every 2 feet, Timothy had driven a piece of driftwood deep into the coral crevices so that I could feel them as I went along. Neither of us knew what to do about the sea urchins, but Timothy said he'd think mightily about them. He had taken a large rock to smash them along the path over the reef top, but in time they would come back. We went out about 50 feet along the reef. So it looks like they're kind of walking on the ocean because the reef is just at the surface of the water, just a little under, and then sometimes just a little bit above the surface. But in time, they would come back. We went out about 50 feet along the reef, and then he said, "Now we fish." He described the hole to me. It was about 20 feet in diameter, which was all the way across, and 6 to 8 feet deep, kind of like a pool that you'd have in a backyard. The bottom was sandy, but mostly free of coral so that my hooks would not snag. He said there was a most natural opening to the sea so that the fish could swim in and out of this coral-walled pool. He took my hand to have me feel all around the edges of the hole. The coral had been smoothed over by centuries of sea wash. Timothy said that the sand in the seawater acted like a grindstone on the sharp edges of the coral. It was not completely smooth, but there were no jagged edges sticking out. "Now reach down here," Timothy said, "and tug off the mussel." I put my hand into the warm water, kneeling down over the edge. I felt a mussel, but in ripping it loose, I lost my balance, and only Timothy's hand prevented me from falling in. If you are blind, the sensation of falling can be terrifying. My memory of the fall off the raft was still very clear, if you remember when he fell off the raft and the sharks were there. Timothy said, "Easy there, Philippe. Just sit a moment and relax." His voice was soothing. "If ever you do fall in, just stay in the hole a while. Feel which way the water washes, then follow it to the ledge and grab hold, and pull your own self out." Timothy guided my hands in opening the tough mussel shell and digging out the slippery meat out to bait the hook. "'Tis an outrageous sharp knife, so be very careful of your fingers." Then he told me to feel the hook and slip the mussel bait over the barb. I'd fished many times with my father, and this was easy. Rusty bolts served as sinkers. Timothy had found several pieces of wood with bolts in them, had burned them, then raked the bolts out of the ashes. He'd unraveled a lifeline from the raft to make single strands for the fishing line. I dropped the hook and sinker overboard. In a moment, there was a sharp tug. I jerked, flipping the fish back over my shoulder so it would land on the reef. Timothy cheered and told me to feel along the line to the wiggling fish. Then take the hook out. Squirming and jumping in my hand, it was small but fat. I grinned over toward Timothy. When I had fished before, it was fun. Now I felt I had done something very special. Remember, being blind and fishing and catching a fish is very special. I was learning to do things all over again by touch and feel. I said to Timothy, "This is outrageous humbug and good fish, oh." He just spoke in Timothy's accent to Timothy. He laughed with pleasure. Every day after that, I did all the fishing. Timothy, of course, continued to get langosta. He had to dive for them, but I caught all the fish. After the third morning, he let me go out alone on the reef. I'd feel my way along his driftwood stobs, find the hole, pry a mussel and loose, and then fish. I was alone on the reef, but somehow I always felt he was sitting on the beach nearby. I could sense his presence, yet he was always at the hut when I got back there. Have you ever had that where you're sitting and you kind of feel someone's behind you looking at you? He kind of felt that way. And why was Timothy doing that? Timothy was protecting him, watching him. He's like a nervous father. He's watching and making sure he's okay. And then, so he's sitting on the beach watching Philip. And when Philip gets up, Timothy jumps up, runs back to the camp and just sits there. "Yeah, I was doing nothing. I'm just here." So that Philip feels like he did it all by himself. We often talked about the Cay and what was on it. Timothy had not thought much about it. He took it for granted that the Cay was always there. But I told him about geography and how maybe a volcano could have caused the Devil's Mouth. He'd listen in fascination, almost speechless. We talked about how the little coral animals might have been building the foundations of the Cay for thousands of years. I said, then sand began to gather on it, and after more years, it was finally an island. It was as if a new world had opened up for Timothy. He kept using that same expression. That be true. I found out that he'd never thought about how the sea grape or the vines or the coconuts came to our Cay. I told him what I knew. Seeds had drifted in from the sea, or birds had brought them. After a rain, they'd taken root. The lizard, he asked sternly. I bet a bird flying from another island holding a mother lizard in its beak dropped it here. Then the baby lizards were born, or maybe a mother lizard washed ashore on driftwood during a storm. Timothy was very impressed, and I felt good that I'd been able to tell him something. We found a lot to talk about. I mean, think about it. There's no radio, there's no TV, there's no phone, there's no anything electric, anything you can plug in, nothing with a battery. They just talked a lot. I think it was the 5th morning of the week that I blurted out to Timothy, I'll climb the palm now. Eh, Philippe, he said. And I could almost see the grin on his face and the light in his eyes as he looked skyward, greedily, I'm sure. He said, there is one coconut tree over there that has a sway in his back and an old horse. That is the one to climb. Remember that? He's been dying to eat these coconuts. Timothy has been just staring at them, going, oh, I want those coconuts. And now Philip has finally said, you know what? I'm ready. Let's climb. I'm going to climb it up. I'll climb up there and I'll get it. And why do you think now Philip feels confident to do that? Oh, yeah, the fishing, the getting around by himself, the learning to be independent. That's awesome. That's an awesome feeling. And so now he says, I'm ready. I'm going to go up and get those. I was trembling a little as he led me to the tree, telling me I should go up just a short way, climb it like a monkey. If I could do it, I was to come back down, put the knife between my teeth, and go up again. The trunk of this palm tree must have been about 2 feet in diameter because I could easily put my hands around to the back. I grasped it, hunched my body, placed my bare feet on the rough trunk, and began to climb. Timothy was probably holding his breath. I went up about 10 feet and froze. I could not move up or down. My legs and arms were rigid. Timothy, standing below to catch me if I fell, called up softly, Philip, 'tis no shame to ease your own self back down to the sand. Slowly I began to back down along the trunk. The bark was rough against my hands and feet, but what I felt most was Timothy's disappointment. I couldn't have been more than a few feet off the ground when I took a deep breath and said to myself, if you fall, you'll fall in sand. Then I started climbing again. Timothy called up, you have forgot the knife. Remember how much he cares about Timothy. He's saying, I don't care that I'm scared. I want Timothy to have these coconuts. He deserves them, and I'm going to do it. I knew that if I stopped now, I'd never climb it. I didn't answer him, but kept my hands and feet moving steadily. Then I heard him shout, you be getting to the top. Palm fronds brushed my head. I grasped the base of one to pull myself up. Timothy let out a roar of joy. Then he told me how to reach the coconuts. It took a long time to pull, tug, twist 2 of them loose, but they finally fell. I stayed in the palm another few minutes to rest, then slid down. I had won. What did he win? Did he win the coconuts? No, something else. I think something more important. He won. He conquered something. He conquered something. It had to do with his fear, his inner voice that told him, you can't do it. You can't do it. What are you telling yourself you can't do? And what do you need to conquer? As my feet touched the ground, Timothy hugged me, yelling, the palm harass us no more. We drank every drop of the coconut milk and feasted on the fresh meat. Squatting near me, his teeth crunching the coconut, Timothy said, "You see, Philip, you do not need the eye now. You have done without the eye what I couldn't do with my whole body." It was almost as if I had graduated from the survival course that Timothy had been putting me through since we had landed on the Cay. It rained that night, a very soft rain, not even enough to drip through the palm frond roof. Timothy breathed softly beside me. I had now been with him every moment of the day and night for 2 months, but I had not seen him. I remembered that ugly, welted face. But now in my memory, it did not seem ugly at all. It seemed only kind and strong. I asked, "Timothy, are you still black?" His laughter filled the hut. Okay, well, that's a great chapter. One of my favorites. I love that chapter. I hope that you enjoyed it too, and I hope you understand and enjoy the bonding between these two very different people who now mean the world to each other. They mean the world to each other. And I think it's a beautiful thing. And it has nothing to do with skin color. It has to do with their heart and their soul and their thoughts and their feelings and their dedication to each other. All right, guys. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. And I look forward to seeing you again tomorrow. And I'll read some more for you. And I hope you're keeping up with all the questions and taking care of all of your responsibilities. All right, guys, I will see you tomorrow. Take care. I need to go get something to eat maybe I'll have some coconut today. All right. Well, we'll see you guys later. Take care and goodbye.